Alrighty, I see it's recording, so once Chloe gets this up here. So guys, today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, and in these different things, we can think of each one as a puzzle. And at the end of a puzzle, we always put all those pieces together to make one big picture that can help us into our future or help just finish that ending project that we wanted. So when you think of this, we always want one specific piece. And me and Chloe are going to start off with our two pieces, character and influence. So for character, one thing that always comes to mind for me is showing hogs. And with showing hogs, we kind of come up short sometimes when it comes to winning, or sometimes we might fall short in the end and not be successful at all. So there's been a lot of times for me showing hogs and goats all across North Carolina that I wasn't quite in that winner's circle. I fell short and I had to go home that day and kind of think about what I could do to work towards the next show. But the one thing that always kept me pushing through was the fact that I had these younger students and these younger kids that were looking up to me to really show what my character was going to be. So one thing that happened way back when I was about 10th grade, I saw my little brother get really upset when he lost the show. And what impacted me with that was because the only reason why he acted upset was because he had seen me do that same exact thing. So in times like that, that's when it really comes to mind that our character with how we handle losses and how we handle victories is what's going to be shown in others. And that's where it really comes out that the quote of the truth of your character is expressed through the choice of your actions. So the choice of my actions, either accepting that loss for what it is and working harder for my future, or handling that victory in a way that I wasn't gloating over others and wasn't rubbing it in other people's faces. That's what showed to those younger students, my little brother and my little brother's friends, that that's how they should handle things like that. And with that being said, I'm going to toss it over to Chloe and let her kind of build on her character story.
So, like Colton said, character is a lot about what you do when people aren't watching. So, it reminded me of something that happened to me back in fifth grade. And I don't know about y'all, but when my class got in trouble, we were always made to walk laps around our outside playground setup. And so, we had gotten in trouble as a class. People weren't participating the way that they were supposed to. So, as a class collectively, we had to walk 5 laps around our outside setup. And so we were walking, and we're not supposed to talk during this time. So I'm just kind of sticking to myself, kind of going at it. And we get to the 4th lap, and I realized that all my friends quit walking. And I knew 1, 2, 3, 4, but we hadn't done the 5th lap yet. So my teacher wasn't paying attention, and they went to the teacher and said they were done, and they left. But I knew deep down that we hadn't done the task in front of us, which was to walk 5 laps around the playground. And so I keep walking. And as I'm walking, my teacher comes up to me and is like, Chloe, you know you're done, right? You don't have to keep walking. And that's when I just kind of explained to her that we had only walked 4 laps, and I wanted to make sure that I did what I was asked to do, which was the 5 laps. And that brings back to that quote about the truth of your actions is behind the truth of your character is behind the choice of your actions. So right there, my character was being tested, and I was showing integrity. That was doing the right thing, even when people weren't really watching. I could have been almost like behind a closed door, but my character was what was pushing through. And so that's why it's important during those times to stick true to our character and stick true to who we are. So that brings us to our next question, and this is where we're going to get everybody involved. The question is, when has your character been tested? So using the chat feature that we were using earlier in the webinar, let's drop maybe a sentence or just a scenario of when your character has been tested. So let's just take a short amount of time, drop those in the chat, and we'll talk about them once we've dropped them in the chat. So just starting off, I see someone dropped that their character was tested when their soccer team didn't perform as well as they hoped it would. So this is a lot like what Colton was saying. When you're in that time where you're facing this challenge or this task and it doesn't go exactly the way that you wanted it to, it's important during that time to keep the smile on your face and keep the character going because people are always watching you. I see a few other people. Somebody said their character was tested when I didn't do very well in a golf tournament. Once again, it seems like we have a lot of sports people in here. So in that team setting, in that individual setting, when we're competing for maybe a prize or just bragging rights, a lot of times it's important to not be somebody who just gives up when things go bad. That's your true character, is when you're able to stick through. And then I'll just read this last one. It says, in school, when others might not have been so kind to a new student, I had to break the norm and do what was right, which was to welcome my new classmate. That's extremely important. It reminds me of another time when my character was tested, and there's kind of like this mold at our lunch, and you have to sit in a certain spot according to the social cliques. And so I decided to kind of go out of that clique and sit with a student who hadn't had people there with them. So that was kind of showing our character. For the one who dropped that in the chat, was we wanted to make sure that everybody felt appreciated and felt like they were involved. And then we'll just do one more. My character was tested when I was bullied when I was younger, but I was still kind of my bully, and now we are friends. See, that's a really good way to show how character can take you from a rough spot in your life. So for this student, they've been going through bullying, but they didn't succumb to the bully. They didn't fight back or act angry to them. And later on down the road, they're friends now. So people are watching you all the time, and your character that sticks through is really important. So that's just one of our puzzle pieces. And the next one is influence. So influence kind of ties into character, but I sum it up in this quote that I found: leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. So every time you're anywhere and people are there with you, you're making an influence. It reminds me, I'm the second oldest of 6 children. So I have 4 younger siblings always looking up to me, and they're looking at me when I'm in school, when I'm at my home, at my church, or even in FFA. I remember being on a Zoom call and my sister got on, and I don't think she realized that I was in the Zoom call with her. And she was talking about how she looked up to me as an FFA officer. And I didn't even realize that I was making that big of an impact. But because of that leadership position I had people looking up to me. And it's the same for every one of us. We have those different positions where we're influencing, and we might not even recognize it, but we are. And so I'm going to toss it over to Colton to talk about how he's influenced.
So my biggest influence story can go back to a service project that we have at my high school called Hunger Heroes. And in that project, we package up food and put in book bags to be sent home with students who aren't quite as fortunate as others to have a meal over the weekend, or say like Christmas break or Thanksgiving break. And the biggest part of this being an influence to me was because we never got to see exactly who we were impacting. We would go every day after school, package up all the food for it to be sent out the next morning, and we would never see who walked into that room to pick up those book bags. Our ag teacher would take the bags, put them in the garage, and then that's where they would stay until she was ready to pull those out and hand those out to students. And then if the students didn't come to school, she would drive to their house and drop the food off for them. So it wasn't really as much of we got to see how we were impacting others, but instead I got to see how I was influencing others to get involved in service projects. Because that one small service project that we started grew into multiple service projects throughout our school, with food drives and sending letters to the veterans, our homeless veterans, and across seas. So I not only got to see how I was influencing my own self, but I also got to see how I was influencing all of those around me to get involved in service projects. So that goes right back to our quote: is leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And with that being said, now we're going to have just another question, let you drop it in the chat. And that is, when have you influenced someone else? So we can start with this first one, and it says, I influence children across the globe when I fill up shoeboxes to send to other countries that might not have the resources that I do. So that's just expanding not only on your local area or yourself, but you're also influencing all those people around the world that may not have ever thought about that. And then I see also, just as Jacob said here, that after he had a friend that after he saw what he did in FFA, he was influenced to join the FFA. And then another one just to round this out, and then they helped with a ranch that provides opportunities for kids with rough backgrounds. So that's an awesome opportunity because you're not just influencing people, but you're influencing yourself to help get out in those activities. And with all that being said, I'll just pass it back over to Chloe to help round this out and finish this puzzle piece.
So, like Colton was saying, the character and the influence kind of go hand in hand. And those are just two pieces that are going to help put our puzzle together at the end of our presentations. But the two takeaways, number one is refine your character. As we saw in the chat, there are a lot of different situations that we probably didn't think about it, but it was testing our character, whether it was maybe standing up against a bully or going out of the norm to make sure that the people in the lunchroom have somebody to sit with them. It's really testing our character. And then second is maximizing our influence. So those simple things like watching somebody who's in FFA and then following in their pathway so that somebody else can watch you. It's these simple things, and those are what are going to help you refine your character and maximize your influence. So with that being said, I'm going to toss it over to McKenna and Tripp, who are going to talk about our next puzzle piece.
Thanks, Chloe. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen. We are super excited to be talking about our next topic today, which is areas of knowledge. So just to start off, a cool thing that I like to make a connection to is life as a leader can be like a giant game of Jeopardy. I know we've all heard of this game where there's a bunch of categories and you see a bunch of numbers you can dive straight into and just see how knowledgeable you are about various subjects. Just like Jeopardy, there are tons of different topics that matter in our lives. And as leaders, we are called to be educated. So for our thought question, just to get us started and get us rolling right into this webinar, we're going to say, if your life were a Jeopardy game, what do you think your categories would be? So just to help us get moving along with that, as you're thinking of those categories, I'm going to share some of my categories. So me personally, I would say I have agriculture production, FFA, education, soccer, the office, and Christianity. Now, I will be the first to tell you, probably one of my strongest categories on here is going to be the office. If you know anything about me, you know that I can tell you a quote from almost any episode, and that episode is probably one of the ones that a lot of people don't remember. So for me, I'd probably go straight to that $1,000 category. But one of the ones that I'm not too comfortable with is probably agriculture production, which I know you're probably thinking, wait a second, McKenna, aren't you a state officer? And you're exactly right. But I will be honest with you, I didn't come from that agricultural background, so I know that that's one of my weaknesses, and that wouldn't be one of my stronger Jeopardy categories. So what I'm going to challenge you to do right now is just drop one or two of those Jeopardy categories, and Tripp is going to help us share some of the ones that he sees right now.
So I just dropped two of my own in the chat. Just like McKenna is with The Office, I'm the exact same way with Friends. I've seen the entire series at least 10 times over, and I watch it all the time. Also, I'm really, really knowledgeable on horticulture because that was my favorite ag class in school. Chloe said she is very knowledgeable on baking and music, and yes, she is. Giselle said taekwondo and art. Oh, interesting. That's a cool one. Allie said math and sewing. Colton said showing pigs and fish. I'm assuming fishing. Megan said music and cooking. Preston says he's very knowledgeable about Duck Dynasty. That used to be my favorite TV show. Oh, and also Friends. Y'all got a lot of them. Abby's animal care. Destiny is piano and crochet. Casey said chickens and food. Abby said eating. Same girl, same. But as you can see, there's literally so many categories that you guys are going over. And that's just like our life. Each of us are different, and we have different areas of knowledge that we apply to in our everyday life.
That's exactly right. So thanks, guys, for sharing that with us. We love hearing your little areas of knowledge that you think you're most impactful and most educated about. Whenever we talk about areas of knowledge within the FFA, a lot of times you can break it down to some a bit simpler categories, which I know you're probably looking at this list and you're thinking, McKenna, is that really much simpler? But if we have something that helps us kind of guide us along where we should have that basis of knowledge, it kind of helps us to get on the right path. So some main points that Tripp and I really like to dive into are food, fiber, agriculture issues, natural resource issues, FFA, our personal favorite, education, and current issues. Now, it is absolutely impossible for all of us to be completely knowledgeable about all those subjects. So some key connections that Tripp and I really like to make are just what are some pretty basic questions that we can get started to have as a baseline. Now, I really urge you to just take out your phone and snap a picture of all these questions. What that's going to help us to do is it's going to get our brains working. This way we can start with those questions and just really be involved and make sure that our knowledge is covering a basis of all those areas. But Tripp and I really want to encourage you to step beyond that surface level, dig a little deeper and see what questions you can develop for yourselves. So if y'all want to go ahead and snap a picture of that or just write a few of them down, we really encourage you to do so. All right, and then as we lead in, if you look over to the right, you'll see a quote and it says, "Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power." A lot of times we think and we hear that knowledge is power. But a lot of times, if we're just trying to consume all the knowledge that we can at once, and we're not willing to take the knowledge that we're gaining and apply it back, then it's kind of useless, right? We can take all this knowledge into our brains and think that we are doing a great job with it, but we have to take a different look at things. We can be knowledgeable, but our power truly lies within the way that we are willing to apply it and the way that we are willing to distribute our knowledge as well. So the future of agriculture. We think about our FFA creed, we think about our own impact and where we're heading to in the future. I'll be the first to tell you that knowledge transformed me personally from a clueless individual into a mindful consumer. Our knowledge is vital, our impact is essential, and our work starts now. So our question to you today is, how can we further develop ourselves in our knowledge to further develop ourselves? Well, we have a lot of lovely resources that we can really look into. One of the two that I know that you are going to hear about a lot is ncffa.org, but I really urge you to also check out ffa.org and usda.gov and just many more. We also have some cool podcasts and YouTube videos coming up, but one of the coolest things that Tripp and I can institute to you is that leaders are readers. So make sure to check out those books and just be willing to share that word as well. And of course, if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out to Tripp and I. But our life is like a giant game of Jeopardy. What are your categories going to be? Now I'm going to pass it over to Tripp, and he is going to tie us right back into ag literacy.
So when it comes to areas of knowledge, let's reflect back on the quote that McKenna talked about. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. And as FFA members, we need to be using our skills in ag literacy with our areas of knowledge. For example, every time you go out in an FFA polo, your FFA jacket, or anywhere where you are representing FFA, there's going to be at least one person out there who doesn't know. There's going to be a lot of people who don't know, and they're going to come up to you and ask, what is FFA? What are the future farmers of America? And that is the time where you use your areas of knowledge and create ag literacy among everybody who is inside and outside of the ag community. So if you've ever heard of an elevator speech, you could think of it like that. Always having some kind of information ready to throw offhand about what FFA is and what it means to you. We talked about those different areas of knowledge through a Jeopardy board. Each one has different ones. So if I were to talk to someone about FFA, I would go over all that FFA does and ag education and then the ag industry as a whole about how it's so beneficial. And I would probably throw in there that FFA is the reason that I got to see my first cow up close and personal, and the first time I got to see a sheep up close and personal through livestock judging and career development events and things like that. I'd let them know all about how the ag industry is very important and how FFA promotes agriculture and creates leaders for our industry. So me and McKenna both encourage you to go out, use your areas of knowledge and create ag literacy, not only amongst FFA members in the ag community, but everybody in your local communities. And now I'm going to throw it back over to Casey and Abby.
All right. So now we're going to jump right back in to being a team player. So let me get that going. All right. So When we talk about being a part of a team, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Let's just take a few seconds to drop our answers in the chat. All right, so we see a few good answers of working close together, respect others' opinions, compromise, and understand one another. And to finish us out, I'm going to talk about inclusion. I know personally, the first thing I think about when I think about working as a team, I think about a sports team. We see baseball, basketball, and we see a group of people that are coming together with one common goal, and that's to play a game. So that's kind of what my thought process is when I think about a team. So, what is a team player? The ability to work in a team setting. Sometimes we know in life we're going to have to work with people that we don't necessarily get along with. But despite that, we all have the same goal and we have to achieve that goal through a team. Value diversity of opinion. We know that when we work with a group of people, there's going to be a difference of opinion, but we still have to respect that, even if we don't believe the same thing. Inclusivity. We have to make sure that everybody in our group is included. We don't want anybody to feel left out just because they think a little different than we do. And lastly, selflessness. We have to remember that just because we believe one thing, that we can't put ourselves above others. We have to do what's best for the team in that situation. So now we are going to watch a video from Toy Story.
Everyone, listen, I thought I told you. When Mom quickly cleans the bedroom like that, expect to be put in the closet.
How much longer? Keep it to a dull roar, Rex. Deep breath, Jesse, deep breath. Settle down, Slink. Sit. Good boy.
Sheriff, do I need to be worried?
No, my guys are veterans. They'll hang in there.
Good, just keep them calm until we get word.
Yes, ma'am. How are you feeling about today? Good. Good. Yeah, good. I'm good. Good.
We're on. Bonnie's done with breakfast. Any minute now.
You hear that? Any minute now. Wind them if you got them. Keep your batteries clean, your joints on lunch.
Thanks, Woody. I got it.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're right.
The town is open! Hi, Mayor! Banker! Hi, Ice Cream Man! Hi, Hat Jump Owner! Mailman! And the Sheriff! Okay, bye, toys!
Okay, so let's take a few minutes to think about the different characteristics of a team player that Woody showed in this video. And when we have those answers, let's drop those in the chat. We have looking out for his friends, he communicated with others, and he was selfless. He was including everyone in all the activities, and he was trying to lift the spirit of others and staying positive and motivated. So now let's talk about how those tie into these 6 characteristics of a team player. Make sure you understand your role. That's something that we saw Woody understand. We had the doll standing at the top and saying, Woody, I've got this. And he was okay, and he took that step back and let her take charge. You welcome collaboration. We saw him talking to his friends and saying, hey, it's going to be okay. Don't be scared, whatever happens. You hold yourself accountable. Woody was there for his friends. He knew that they needed him, and so he was there to talk to them and make sure they were okay. You are flexible. Even though he didn't get picked, he was okay because he knew that it would be okay in the end, and his friends were still having a fun time. You have a positive attitude. Whether he got picked or not, he was still there and was that emotional support. And you commit to the team. We've all seen Toy Story, and we know that Woody is very much so committed to his team. So how do we implement this in our lives? When we're a team player, it's not only on a sports team or FFA. We have to think about when we work in a job or we're doing a class assignment that we have to make sure that we do our parts and show these characteristics of a team player. With that, I'm going to toss it over to Abby.
All right, y'all, we have finally reached the very last skill we are going to cover today, and that is communication. So I'm going to ask all of y'all to help me out with a little task right now. And if you can go up to the top of your screen, and next to the little green bar that says Abby is sharing screen, there should be an options. If you could hit that, and it'll drop down a bar, and then there'll be an option to annotate. If you can get to that, please go ahead and annotate on the screen what you think communication is. Do the first thing that pops into your head and try to be a little creative. So we're going to take about half a song to accomplish this. Are there any questions on how to get to annotate? If we can throw that in the chat. All right, sweet. I already see some. So we'll go ahead and start.
I am not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. But I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us. Who will glorious? When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send the blood, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me.
All right, y'all threw some really great ones on the screen. I'll go ahead and read some ones that stuck out to me. When you speak with others, you're able to get your point across and listen to their feedback. That is really important with both of the options of getting your point across, but also listening to feedback. Talking to others to complete a common goal effectively. And y'all put listening on here a lot, and being transparent. That is another really important one. So thank y'all for that. Ooh, let me try to figure out how to clear. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to figure out how to, there we go, thank you. All right. I'm so sorry Zoom's not being my friend right now. There we go. So I broke down communication into 3 main points, or kind of portions, how you break it down into, which is probably commonly heard as verbal, nonverbal, and then written. So verbal is easily probably the most common that we all know about in communication, which is, actually talking to someone and being there in person and getting your point across using words. And then nonverbal is, those important hand gestures, such as shaking hands with one another when we come into an interview or we're meeting someone new. And then written is the kind of least common nowadays form of communication, where is how we communicate through written words. So these are all really important to keep in our mind when we're thinking about how we can communicate to each other effectively. So now I know my biggest thing when I think about communication is team communication, because I think this is the hardest to accomplish. A lot of issues we can have on a team is maybe not all being on the same page, and having a lot of confusion on the team, or maybe there's some bossiness and not some fair leading. And then there's also not everyone's listening to one another. I know in high school, my senior year, when I was president, I got a lot of comments from my team members that I could be just a little bit bossy sometimes, and I was taken aback. And so I was able to really step back, look at the picture as a whole, and figure out where I needed to change. And so I encourage all of y'all to go ahead and step back, look at the big picture of your team, and find out what everyone needs. So we can do this through the 3 B's to team communication. Be inclusive. We have to be inclusive to everyone, or else it's just not going to work out very smoothly. Like someone said before, we have to be transparent, clear, and concise. If we're not all on the same page, it is probably not going to work out how we have it pictured in our head. And lastly, we need to be respectful, because that's just the decent thing to do with one another, and that is how you work effectively together. And so there are a whole bunch of other advice that we can all talk about in communication, but if I were to go into everything, we would be sitting here all day long. So now we have finally went through all 5, even though it's only 4 puzzle pieces right here, but all 5 of the skills and characteristics we talked about, which is character, influence, knowledge, team player, and now communication. So if you think about all of these as your puzzle piece, when they all come together and we learn how to use these effectively, we finally finish that puzzle that we have been working on for so long. And your puzzle can be your FFA journey, it can be your career or student life, or it can just be ultimately our lives together. So thank y'all so much for coming, and I hope we were able to leave some of those lasting characteristics on y'all.